Hey, welcome back, all. Just when I thought we were done with League of Legends, DraftKings hits us with one more two-game slate, which I do actually think will be the last one before we get to the summer splits. Uh, so I just want to go over a few quick notes on this slate. Going to be a relatively short video, but there's a few things that I think are important and could give us an edge today if you are in fact playing. All right, so the two-game slate is the Brazilian Challenger Circuit. It was a 16 split. They are now into the first round of the playoffs where the top four teams advance. It's single elimination, and it's going to be a best of five series. The first match between Santos and Falco will take place on Monday, and then the Havan LG and Team One match will take place on Tuesday. Just remember with League of Legends that there is no late swap. So you got to lock in everything before the first match starts. I have not taken the time to look at whether either of these teams use substitutes on a regular basis, but I do recommend looking into that just to make sure you don't get caught out with a player who either may not start or who is likely to be subbed if the early matches are not going well. All right. I've got the metrics up here for each team. Just a few things quickly that kind of stand out is that this first match between Santos and Falcao does look like it has a higher probability of being the higher kill total match just based on the pace here. The other note I think is worth mentioning is that in looking at tower differential 15 minutes in and gold differential 15 minutes in, there's a pretty big discrepancy here between Santos and Falcao. So if Santos gets out to some early leads, that could be their path to winning the series. As you'll see here, the Havan LG Team 1 match is basically a coin flip per the current lines. And then Santos is a fairly significant favorite at the moment. However, I think it's interesting to look at the history between these teams because each team played their opponent 3 times during the regular season. Um, Very interesting here because the underdog for the current lines actually won the season series in both of these matchups. Falcao took down Santos 2-1 during the season. Uh, and then you can see here the total kills 47 to 36 over the course of that matchup. And then this one really jumps out. Havan LG, the underdog here, won the season series 3-0, clean sweep. I mean, they won this thing handily with a total of 43 kills to 15 for Team One. Um, I'm a little perplexed as to why Team One is a bit of a favorite here. Um, I think with Santos at least, their body of work over the course of the season, they were the top team in terms of win percentage, so that's why they're favored here. But not quite sure why Team One is favored here over Havan based on this season split. So I will need to look a little further into that. But just on the surface there could be some value in both of the underdogs here based on how they performed against their opponent during the season. Okay. Uh, I went through the entire season for the Brazilian Challenger Circuit and I averaged out what each player got in terms of fantasy points in the wins for their team. And then I looked at what their opponent allowed to each position and losses. And then I averaged that here. I assigned 60% weight to the player average and 40% weight to the opponent allowed average. I think it may even make more sense to weight the player average at like 75 or 70%. But nonetheless, this is a really good place to start to look at, which players are most likely to score the most fantasy points over the course of a 5-game series if their team does win. As an overall note, the scoring in this league is very interesting. Um, so if you're looking at the top scorer for each team here, you're going to notice some interesting things. For Falco, it's a top and a mid who are the top scorers. You got another mid here for Havan, a mid and a jungler here for Team One, and then a mid as the top scorer for Santos. So I think typically in League of Legends, at least like LPL, LCK, that most people are playing, and even in the EU Masters, the ADC is more often than not going to be the highest scoring position and wins, but that is not necessarily the case here in the Brazilian Challenger circuit. So I think that's really important to note. I took a quick peek at the pricing on DK, and it looked like the ADCs were all still the most expensive player, and they're each on each team. So I think there's a huge amount of value, especially if you're stacking Falco, for example, and going with the top position, particularly given how cheap he is. So I think you could be, the optimal lineup on this slate could certainly um, end up leaving a lot of salary on the table because you're not necessarily going to want to captain ADCs for some of these teams. And instead, you may be captaining a mid, a jungler, or a top here. So just keep that in mind. Um, I have not built lineups or really dug through each team yet, but if you want to pause it on this screen, this is going to give you a really good idea of which players from each team are likely to be the highest scorer in wins. Um, Based on the lines and then the history between these teams that I mentioned earlier, I probably will have exposure to all four teams and just go with multi-entry, and as I've mentioned before, focus instead on um, when I do stack a team, picking the players from that team that are the most likely to score the most points. All right, that's all I've got for today. Of course, if you do have any additional questions about the slate, just leave a comment below or find me on Twitter, and I'll be happy to try to answer that. All right, good luck out there today, and I will see you guys next time.